Welcome to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. You're listening to us on United Public Radio. The intro music that you heard was Mark of the Doomslayer by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. And today, we are pre-recording today. So if you have any super stickers or super thanks, I won't, be able to display them. But I just want to let folks know in advance, as I am traveling somewhere in the United States at this time. So today's guest is another amazing one. Daz Smith is an artist, graphic designer, author, and active remote viewer who works with some of the most recognized operators and researchers in the field of RV. He also runs several large information websites on the subject of remote viewing, and he edits and publishes a magazine covering the latest breakthroughs in remote viewing from the standpoint of protocol, application, and analysis. Daz, welcome. How you doing, my friend?
Hi there. It's great to be back and to chat with you again.
Yeah, it's I think the last time we talked maybe back in February or January or something like that. Yeah, I think it was January. Yeah, we recorded in January. It probably appeared in February. So
excellent. Yep.
All right, so this is a slightly, not slightly, a much larger audience. So a lot of folks might not be familiar with their work, even though with your work. So even though they should be. So why don't you just give folks a quick background of who you are, in addition to kind of the little scraps I gave them in your bio.
Okay. Yeah.
Where you're from, how you got involved in remote viewing, and kind of what you're doing today.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. It's been it's a long journey. I've been a remote viewer for, I think, around about 28 years now. But before I was interested in the subject of remote viewing, I spent pretty much my entire life from the age of, I can remember as far back as 8 years old onwards, essentially being addicted to and interested in all things esoteric. So I spent my pretty much my teenage to adult life researching this. I started formal training in classical psychic techniques, probably around about the age of 12 or 13, reading books, and then my mother teaching me a few things on the side. At the time, she was a clairvoyant healer, medium, and she was the person that was running the spiritualist church, which we attended. When I was around about 15 years old, I took formal, proper classical training. So I trained in clairvoyance, mediumship, divination, tarot, healing, pretty much everything that I could get my hands on back then. Around about from the years 1989 onwards, I started getting into UAP research and UFOs quite heavily here, mainly because of the crop circles in the UK. We saw them all in the papers, and I was interested. I was like, whoa, what's happening in here? And I'm quite lucky because I live in a city called Bath. And it's literally just half an hour down the road from all the major crop circle, Stonehenge kind of activity. So when I was 19 years old, I got into the crop circles, and that led me into UFOs and ufology. And I got stuck into that until around about 2005. And then I kind of thought, well, I pretty much have every video, every book, every available freedom of information Act document. I know they exist. There's nowhere else to go from there. So I dropped mainly the UAP research and just carried on with the remote viewing. And I've been training in remote viewing for 27 years. And now doing it as my full-time job. And enjoying seeing the far reaches of the universe, really, with the skill that I have.
Okay, now, when you said you received formal training in mediumship and divination and all that stuff, what does that mean? Is there like a formal school? Is there like a formal group that does this stuff? Or is it a group that's not known to the rest of the world, that's, a little bit sequestered? Yeah, if you could explain some of that.
Yeah, sure. For most people, you can usually go to, if you have any kind of spiritualist groups or any esoterically based people in your area. As I said, I was part of my mother's spiritualist groups, and they essentially held these classes. So they had teachers come in, and you would go down once or twice a week with a group of people, and you had trainers coming in and teach about crystals, about channeling, mediumship. and you would take a year or two's training in all the different aspects of that, and at the end of it come out with not an official accreditation, but you'd have experience in a certificate, and you'd know which area worked best for you that you could then focus upon if you wanted to for with your research.
And at that point in time, just going back to when you were a teenager, where did your particular talents lie before remote viewing, before all that started?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the telepathic connection was my strongest when we did the experiments on telepathy connections. Yeah, that was definitely strong. And clairvoyance, which makes sense now actually, that's a good question, because I haven't really thought about this kind of stuff because, it's deep in my dark past. But that makes sense now that I'm doing the remote viewing, because it's the closest thing to what I'm doing, with remote viewing. I kind of like the mediumship and talking to dead people. And I used to see kind of dead people and spirits, all kinds of stuff. And not, I'm talking all kinds of weird stuff, like, fairy type stuff and all kinds of weird entities like stuff everywhere. But all that kind of stopped for me when I went into remote viewing research, because I didn't concentrate on it anymore. I kind of blocked that side out and focused, like a laser on remote viewing, that I don't really get any of that other stuff anymore. Because one thing about that classical stuff, which most people find hard, and which is completely different from what I'm doing remote viewing, is that it's all quite spontaneous, and that your instances of intuition and seeing dead people and all this kind of stuff, although you can kind of affect it to happen by being in the right state of mind at the right place and time, the majority of the things that happen are more in control of the universe than in control of you. Whereas remote viewing, I choose the time and day that I'm doing it. I sit down with a pad of paper and a pen, or nowadays I use a tablet, and I'm totally in control of the entire process, beginning to end, how I start, how many times I want to go back in, and so forth. So yeah, it's completely opposite things really. The classical stuff is more spontaneous, and the universe is in control. With remote viewing, you as the viewer are totally in control.
Now, if you wanted to go back to any of that stuff, would you start seeing those entities again, or is that something that kind of like learning how to play the piano? Like, you can still learn how to do that late in life, but you'll never be as good as you could possibly have been, given the way that the brain works, if you picked it up as a child and practiced early. Is it similar to that, or is it different?
Everyone's got their own, different individual skill sets, to a larger and a lesser degree. And it can be enhanced. All of it can be enhanced by training and practice. So I could, with the seeing entities and stuff, it's like a switch. I could, if I put my focus and attention towards it, it would happen, almost like flicking a light switch kind of thing. It's just that it's not an area that I go to right now. So it doesn't happen for me unless I purposely put my intent there. But you're right in that, because I haven't practiced that for 20 odd years now, to a large degree, it's probably not going to be anywhere as good as my remote viewing skills, which I have, seriously focused upon almost every hour of my life. So it would probably take a year or two to really get back into the score of things and hone in the ability on that, if I decided to go in that direction again.
But let's say we take somebody who is 60 years old, right? Who's never done that. And we'll get into all the remote viewing stuff, but we haven't covered this before for the audience. Like, we covered portions of this, like higher level, but I'm really intrigued by it right now. So let's say you take somebody who's 60 years old, you put them through those classes that you went through, and then you take somebody who, was in their early teens, tweens, whatever you want to call it. Could those people develop those skills at the same rate, or do you still have the same issues that you would if you had two similar people learning how to play the piano from scratch, where like the younger person would obviously pick it up faster?
I don't think age matters. I would probably say actually that age probably helps, because once you get to an older age, as you said, 60 something, you've gotten a lot of stuff out of your system, so you're a bit more willing to spend the hours and the dedication that's needed to do this. There are people out there, that, and it's like every endeavor that's skill based in life. There are people that are just naturally talented from the start, and they're just absolutely amazing. But there are, for the majority of us, we have to put in the time and hours to do this, and it's harder when you're a younger person. I equate this pretty much like learning a martial art, because I've learned several martial arts in my life to black belt level. And you'll start a class in any martial art. I've done this many times, and that you'll start a class with like 30 people in the class at the beginning. But to get to like a black belt level, it usually takes about 3 to 4 years to do. And by the end of that class, the original 30 are whittled down to probably 2 people that make it to that level. And it's the same with psychic technique stuff of any kind, really. It's going to take you 2 to 4 years to be really, really good. And a lot of people, especially when you're younger, you just don't have time to do that, 2 or 3 times a week on a weekly basis, because you're thinking about other things in life.
And then in terms of the disciplines that you covered, so mediumship was one.
Yeah. Channeling.
Channeling.
Yeah.
By the way, what's the difference between the two? That's actually a good.
Mediumship is when you kind of communicate. You have the set aim to communicate with essentially what they call past people. People on the other side of. I don't like to use traditional words like death and stuff like that, but people that have passed over in some way. Channeling is where you can. Is very similar, but it's like a slight different frequency in that you're essentially going out to anywhere in the universe, and you're communicating with all different life forms. And there's a myriad of life forms out there, from non-humans to aliens, interdimensional type beings, and even like earth-based weird kind of creature type things. The stuff that you see in fairy tales, like trolls, demons, all that kind of stuff, fairy type creatures, gnomes, all that kind of exist on all these different levels of being. So yeah, channeling means you channeling is more like going out into a zoo, and there's a whole zoo of all different kinds of things out there, whereas mediumship is more like going to a human based zoo, and it's just humans you're dialoguing with.
Okay, and then was telepathy a whole discipline, or was that just determining whether people had
that was just several experiments that we developed over time as part of the classes, and there were other classes as well, like divination, and we were taught all kinds of things, how to use crystals and that kind of stuff, and sound, for example. Well, sound's quite good for healing and for meditation and stuff. Meditation were great classes, but for divination we did like things like tarot. I trained in tea leaves. It's kind of pretty classical stuff. Reading sand, even sand could be read. To be honest, from my research over this, from my entire life, you could pretty much pick anything in the universe out there, and I'm thinking, my post-it pads here or anything, you could chuck bones in the air and see how they feel. You could use anything as a tool to get intuitive information, because all you're using the tool for really is almost like a concentration device to hone your intent. So yeah, anything could be used for divination out there. Use it long enough, learn how the skill works for you personally as a communication person, and that's the core of how it all works, really.
And anything with animals that you did regarding like with this stuff?
It's going back a few years. I think the only thing I did with animals was, I think we may have done a healing on someone, a remote healing on someone's poor dog or something at the time. Yeah, we did. Well, I did lots of healing actually there in physical persons. I mean, you don't touch the people, but you're in close proximity like that. When you go like that, you can actually feel the, or if you've got some kind of psychic ability, you can actually feel the tension between your fingers. You can feel like there's something energy there. So we did lots of almost hands-on healing physically there, but we also tried and we did experiments with remote healing and I do vaguely remember one of them was a dog once, but it's not something I've really gone into too much, that side of things.
And do you do any like Reiki healing, things like that?
No, I haven't. This is it's weird because this is the third interview I've done in a week, right? And it's really strange how this kind of stuff happens.
I know.
Because
With me, it routinely happens. Routinely.
because I've never really been into to Reiki at all.
Yeah.
And no one's ever asked me a Reiki question. But in the last 3 interviews I've done in a week, every single person's asked me about Reiki. And it just so happens that we do projects for a group I run called the Hellfire Group, which is Mysteries Projects. And the project we've just finished, which we're compiling the video on, which is just about to go live in a week's time, just happened to be I was tasked with remote viewing the source of Reiki. So it's just weird. Like in 27 years, no one's ever asked me a Reiki question. In a week, 3 interviewers have asked me Reiki stuff, and it just so happens I've just done a project on Reiki.
Yeah, so that's not a coincidence, clearly, right? So there's
No,
something.
it's
something you need to do
mind-boggling.
with. There's something you need to do with Reiki. By the way, I don't even know why I asked the question. I just was just going down the line, and suddenly that idea popped into my head.
Yeah, and
so I don't think that came from me. I think that came from.
It's very strange, isn't it? That's why I'm laughing, because it's just like how I don't believe in coincidences, and it's just mind-boggling that all these years, all these interviews, no one's ever asked me about Reiki except for the last 3 that I've done, and those 3 just happen to be after I've just finished a Reiki project. It's just like, what are the odds?
Something's
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I give you another example. This happened to me with your colleague Edward Reardon. I had like a dream where this guy Puharich, the name like appeared, and I started, I said something to him about it, and he's just like, I just did a remote viewing on the Council of Nine, and like, here's his book. He pulls a book off the shelf. But anyway, that name came up again yesterday. So I don't know what the deal is with that.
Well, again, there are no coincidences. I'm talking to, and I know very well, a person that's actually producing a documentary about Puharich.
See, I was supposed to ask that question. Yeah. Who? Well, yeah. Who? I mean, can you talk about it? If you can't talk about it, you can't talk about it.
I don't know too much about it. I mean, I know quite a bit about the guy himself. But the guy's called Lance. He did the documentary Third Eye Spies.
Okay. With Russell Targ and
Lance Mangia, I believe his name is. I've interviewed him myself. I know he's heavily involved in doing a documentary about Puharich and his influences. Because I don't know if you know this, but he's very heavily involved in what happened with Yori Geller in SRI, all kinds of, and the Council of Nine, is it, and all kinds of. Very strange stuff back in the 70s, and even more stranger, darker stuff that have been associated to him as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know about the Council of Nine and the Kennedy assassination, all that stuff too, right?
I don't know about the Kennedy assassination, but I don't know too much about the Council of Nine, other than it was a target that I did within Hellfire Group that we did as an RV target that we've put out there.
Well, when you did, I'll just cover that really quick. When you did that, what did you learn about the Council of Nine?
You'll have to forgive me. I do so much work in so many projects that I honestly just cannot remember what I've done, because bearing in mind that was probably about 1.5 years ago, and I've probably done 1,000 RV sessions since then. I honestly can't remember, other than I think there were around about 9 of us that did it. The data's all online on the hellfirerv.org.
Did you say there was about 9 of us that did it?
There literally was 9 remote viewers that did it. Yeah,
of course there was. Right, of course.
And we all got some amazing stuff about this group of discarnate kind of or non-physical entities that we're controlling and doing all kinds of very strange stuff. And all the data's on the Hellfire website. So we have our review one where the tasker says, okay, here's what the target is. Show me your data quickly. So we all do that. That takes about an hour. But then also as separate files, there's each remote viewers going through their, maybe on a whiteboard, maybe just on Zoom or something, going through their RV data in depth so that anyone that's interested in it can do a real deep dive in the information. And that's all freely available online if they want to watch any of that.
Okay. All right. So you do all this stuff. I think I've exhausted. I could probably keep going, but I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna dig up deep, dark memories from the distant past. Okay, well, a little bit, but
Yeah.
not so distant. So you look into this thing called remote viewing. A, how did you find out about it? And B, who was your first teacher?
Yeah, that's a good question. I found, as I said, I got really heavily involved in UFO research, and I became a local UFO investigator here in the UK around about 1991 for an amazing group at the time, a real kind of primary group it was called Quest International. And it's based in Leeds here in the UK. And I had two brothers in it called the Birdsall brothers and an ex-police officer called Tony Dodd. And they used to hold these conferences in Leeds every year, UFO conferences. And, they had the best people that you can imagine coming along giving talks. So they had, Wendell Stevens, Bob Exler. They had, they literally had some of the best people and whistleblowers at their time live on stage giving conferences. So I was at one of those conferences. I think the year was 1992. And one of the investigators was playing an audio tape live on stage. And it was with an alleged member of Majestic 12. And he was talking about how they were tracking these UFOs back to their place of origin, but they were doing it with psychics or remote viewers. So I was listening to this tape, and I came away from that conference thinking, okay, I've vaguely heard about remote viewing in the past in some of the books that I've read, but I didn't know much about it. So I made it my life's go after that to find out about remote viewing. Bearing in mind, this was pre-internet, everything's available on the internet kind of stuff, 1992.
Let me stop you right there before you go any further. From their place of origin? What was their place of origin according to that audio tape?
If I remember correctly, I think it was Orion in the audio tape. Yeah, they were back engineering and following back. And to be honest, in some of the RV projects we've done for Hellfire Group and I've done for other people, I've actually tracked life forms back to a place of origin as well in that kind of information.
Okay, so it's 1992. The internet's kind of just getting popping, so there's not a lot of information out there. You hear this audio tape about, and was this audio tape like it was a remote viewing from this?
It was a remote viewer. At the time, I didn't know this, but at the time, it was a person who claimed to be working for the military. I found out by process of elimination many years later by recognizing the voice. I didn't know it at the time, of course, that it's Ed Dames, who was the Stargate remote viewer and left and set up his own company. So he was essentially spinning secrets at the time because this was before it all went public in 1995. And there's quite a lot of documentation in the Stargate archives kind of to show that they were really upset that he was leaking. But anyway, he was leaking information at the time, and he was talking about how he and his remote viewers are being used to essentially track UAPs back to their point of origin, try to back engineer the craft for the technology, that kind of thing. I didn't know it was Dames at the time, but that essentially the audio tape that I heard was enough to send me on a journey then to reach out as much as I could to find anything to do with remote viewing. And that only really happened once the internet started to take hold in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, really.
Okay, so the internet starts to take hold. What action do you take next to try to learn it?
In the early days there, bearing in mind that the internet was really young, when you had a 14.4 modem, so it took, when you wanted to view an image, it took like 5 minutes for a single image to fill your screen. There were a couple of early internet-based remote viewing groups that met or asked questions and talked to each other over email. One was called Stargate. And I just happened to find that, I don't even know how I found it, but I found it online somewhere and joined this email kind of communication group with many others. There were probably about 100 of us at the time. And it had a couple of the ex-Stargate remote viewers on there as well. So they were giving snippets of information. And I just happened to come across and start a conversation with a man called Lee Culver, who claimed to be ex-Special Forces. And he claimed to be, at the time I was speaking to him, training medical techniques to the military in Russia. And he mentioned me one day. He said, I'm on my way over to America. I'm popping off back in London. I'm at Regent's College. I'm going to go do a 4-day course in remote viewing. And at the time, I was unemployed. I was between design jobs. So he said to me, I know you have no money, but if you can make your way to London, I'll train you for free. And that's essentially what happened. I managed to get enough money to get to London. For 2 weekends, the course was on. He trained me for free. To be honest, I've never spoken to him since or anything. He just went his own way, and I kind of went my own way. But
if you look for him online, he's hard to find, but he's doing like a lot of cryptid stuff in Georgia or something.
Yeah. And he does he still does like emergency tracking and emergency medical techniques, all kinds of weird stuff like that. I mean, when I spent time with him, you can kind of tell by the way a person moves, especially if they've had special forces training and military training. You can tell by the way they move themselves and the way they move. I could tell that he wasn't lying to me about that kind of stuff, but I haven't been able to track his his history past anything past what is online really. But because he trained me for free, I've had this ethos ever since that I pay it forward. So I try to, as much as humanly possible myself, I try to put as much free remote viewing information out, and I also try to mentor at least a couple of people a year for free as well in return ever since.
Okay, so you take this 4-day course. Is it similar to the coordinate remote viewing protocol, or was it a little bit different? Was it like more like ERV, or what was the first foray that you had in remote viewing? What technique were you trained?
Yeah, it was definitely the what we call CRV, the controlled remote viewing format that came out of the military, which was a bit strange at the time because there were only several people in the military that were actually trained in this technique. Especially back then in the early 90s, no one was in the UK training it at all. But yeah, it was clear, the manual we were given was the controlled remote viewing manual that came out of the military. And that was the technique he taught us at the time. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you did this 4-day training, and then what? What did you do next?
I kept in communication with the London group for several years. It eventually fizzled out, which, as I said to you before, it does with this kind of thing. Is people find other things in life that take them away from it. Hardly any, if out of a group of 30 to 50 people, hardly anyone stays the course, and because life just gets in the way. So the speaking to the London group fizzled out after a couple of years, but the internet was starting to take off then. So I managed to reach out over time to other people around the world and through email groups and so on, and build up contacts with them. And it's pretty much just grown organically that way ever since, really.
Now, did you take training with anybody else during the course of this journey, or was it
No,
legal?
not remote viewing wise. I mean, I've had a few lessons off of Courtney Brown, because I spent several years with Dick working for Courtney on projects, and he wanted to take us through what he called his method called SRV, or scientific remote viewing, and he wanted us to he took us through some advanced techniques to see if we could tease extra information out from the target, which I tried, but I found, like most people out there that make changes, they overcomplicate. Instead of simplifying what they're doing, they overcomplicate things, and I think that's what he did. So that those didn't quite work for me in that regard. So, and I've never been one of these people. I call them bunnies. I call them RV bunnies. They kind of hop from one trainer to another every 6 months to a year in hope of picking up some kind of mystical information. I've never really been one of those. I learned the CRV, and then I was like, well, that's it. I just literally spent the next 20 years just honing that and practicing that to every single week, 3 to 4 times a week, every single week, to get the best out of it. I have now made changes to it because I think it's just natural that once you learn anything like a martial art or a skill like a sports, football, anything, you kind of learn to put your own flourishes on the moves. Like, not every kind of martial artist will do the same punches, because you'll find that a certain punch just doesn't work for you. So you adapt and you chuck that punch out. You don't use that one, but you may use hooks instead. So I've adapted the CRV process and made some changes that I now teach myself under a new name. But I've never trained with any other mentor.
Okay. When did you start doing this professionally? Like, how did you fall into that?
That's a good question. I think probably I would say just before my Courtney Brown era. So, when would that be? I would say probably about 2003. And I say professionally first, and I wasn't getting paid for it, but for around about 3 years, I worked for a group called the Find Me Group. And they essentially work with law enforcement agencies throughout the world, mainly the US, though, to try to find missing people, and essentially do it in a way that they're like a middleman. And their head was Kelly Snyder at the time, who was an ex-DEA agent. And he was like the middleman, and he had his group of psychics and remote viewers over here. And then there's the law enforcement agencies over here. So they would go to him. He would be the middleman. So they would trust him. And then he would task us with looking at missing people cases and then liaise with the law enforcement agencies. And it works in a great manner in that it's just not then, 20 psychics chucking loads of information at the police and then swamping them. So I worked with the Find Me Group for several years, probably about 3 years. And I worked probably around about, I think I numbered it, went over something like 255 missing person cases in that period. Some were successful. I never helped in finding a live person, but that's because a lot of these we were called in right at the end of cases, so they were like cases that were code or getting code. Yeah, right. Because we were like the police don't want us involved. They're just like, well, it's last chance saloon, last chance kind of thing. But so I never had to help find a live person, but we did help find a few bodies and missing people, which I'm satisfied with, because that still gives closure to the families. And we did, and I still have several letters from some of these police chiefs saying, it's only because of you guys that we found said missing person. And I didn't get paid, but in some cases, from some of the police forces, and even from, I worked a case for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, for example, just as a friendly gesture, they used to give you a mug or a cap, when they're kind of hats and stuff like that. So I had several of those as payment for helping out on those cases. So I would say that was my first foray into professional work. And then I moved on to working for Courtney for, I think, Courtney Brown and Farsight for about 8 years on projects.
Okay. And then of those cases that you worked on, what percentage do you think you help solve? I guess is you can interpret that in any way you want. But
yeah, I did speak to Kelly about this probably about a year ago. I asked him what his, I went back to after probably about a decade of working with him, and I said, people ask me what are your success rates. He claims to be around about 30% success rate in helping with missing person cases right now. I don't think it was that high when I was working with him, but I can't solidly say what those figures are. But that's what he's claiming. So that's a pretty astounding rate if that's what he's going for. But bear in mind, they do have other resources as well. They're quite unique in that they have us as psychics and intuitives, but they also have helicopter and plane resources, boat resources, and they even have cadaver dogs and stuff like that. So as a civilian organization, they do have quite a lot of resources to go out and act upon the intuitive data.
And how does that relationship work? Do they just give you like a 6-digit number and that's it? Or
yeah, that's how I would receive it. But it was a group. It was a very group of people with different skill levels. As a remote viewer, I was like, I don't want any information. I want to be as blind as possible, because that's our process. It's okay knowing I'm looking at a missing person, because that tells me where to put my focus. But there's still billions of possibilities. But so I didn't have hardly anything other than a coordinate, a random number. but some of the other psychics, they had a lot more information. Like, they had the name of the person, a picture of the missing person, where they went missing from. So a lot more to work with than I did. Yeah, so it varied from person to person. I don't know how they're doing it now, but that's how it worked at the time.
Okay, so 30% is the overall rate. That's not your rate.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
right. So there could be other random psychics that come in that
Yeah.
claim
And
they're psychics and they're like their hit rate's 0%. So there's people that are
absolutely, yeah.
checking
And
down that rate.
yeah, and it's great work. It's nice to do that kind of humanitarian work, but I found that 3 years of it continuously, knowing and the fact that the vast majority of everything we were doing, you were looking at and picking up all the data about dead, mutilated, maimed, murdered people. It starts to take its toll on you. So I stopped doing it, and primarily as well because in some cases you'd give information over, and some cases you see the information act upon, and it is weird because I'd be here in the UK and I'd see the FBI acting on my information in real time on cases, in the news. But there are other cases where you'd give information across, and one of them in particular, I worked a case for Find Me Group, and it was I was given an Excel spreadsheet from two detectives from New York who were working a case where they had, and they called it the smiley face killer. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah, I've heard of that before.
But they had a spreadsheet that I was given access to with over 180 potential victims on it that they claim came from this serial killers, which they wanted us to work. And of course, I was like, well, as a remote viewer, I can't work 180 cases all at once. So I had to liaise with them and say, okay, you pick the best one, the one with the most chance for me to get data on, and I'll work that one. I can't work 180. So I worked that case, and I gave some pretty amazing information back on that. Well, I thought it was pretty much amazing information, and I'm not sure it was entirely acted upon. So, and I spent several weeks on that. So that gave me a bit of darkness against the project, really, and that's why I ended up leaving. It was like, why should I put in all this energy and effort if people aren't acting on the data that you give over?
Yeah, it looks like they eventually did catch the guy. His name is Keith Hunter Jesperson, and
Really?
he's claimed to. So while he is
Might be a
claimed to have
different
killed
case.
as many as 160 people,
Wow,
only
wow.
8 murders have been confirmed.
Okay, I haven't looked at it I haven't looked at it in about 10 or so years, so I'm not very up on the entire thing. But yeah, that was the biggest case that I worked for them. There were others as well. Missing child. One was a missing baby. And most of the data came in from the psychics of the parents had just chucked the baby in the trash, kind of thing. So you work things like this, and it's just really horrific stuff that. Yeah, after a while it took a toll. So I haven't worked many of those cases since, to be honest. But that's because we're so busy doing everything else as well.
Yeah, they're. I mean, I think that guy was the happy face killer.
Yeah, I don't think that's the same one. The data I got, which I gave to the New York police chiefs, I actually saw probably about 5 years ago. I saw they actually released a TV series called Smiley Face Killers, where they actually had the two New York detectives looking into several cases actually on this TV series. And
is that Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte?
That sounds familiar, yes.
Okay.
And I think their theory years later actually mirrored the RV data that I gave them many years before, that it was an organized network of people that were doing this as part of some kind of very strange underground secret society ritual type thing that was going on, because it also spread to other countries. We also have very similar cases of young men being, it's always young men of a certain age, of an age range of something like 8 years, dying all under very similar circumstances. So they're always found in water and rivers after a night out, all very very strange coincidental stuff. So yeah, I gave them all the data on that. and I don't think it was acted upon to the best that it could. So that made me a bit jaded, and that's why I left that group. Not just because of that, but for other reasons as well as the weight of the whole thing. It was just never ending, and it still is never ending. Like I get requests every single week from people privately to find missing people, and you just, and I don't do it now because independently I would be more of a hindrance than a help, because I know from my research in these matters that the police get hundreds of these calls and clues every week, and they have to look into it. So, and the vast majority of the people that claim to be psychic aren't, and it's just false information. So I don't,
Right.
I wouldn't ever work a case like that without being requested by the police anyway. But I'm sure it's the same for every psychic or remote viewer out there of note. I do get at least 2 or 3 queries every week of, can you help me find my brother, friend, boyfriend, girlfriend, all that kind of stuff. And I just have to, I'm sorry to say it, but I just have to point them all in towards Find Me group and turn the majority of them down.
What did you learn about the smiley face killer or killers? Was it one person? Was it a group? Was it?
It was definitely a group that organized themselves through a bulletin board system that were distributed throughout all the major colleges in the US and further. And it was some kind of very strange secret society initiation program, almost like the kind of things you hear about the Skull and Bones type society, kind of weird kind of initiation, kind of dark. And there had this kind of dark kind of magic kind of elements to it as well. So very deep dark stuff. I can always find out the RV data on that and pass that along to you if you're interested in reading it. I do have it on my computer here still.
Yeah, that's fast. And is it still ongoing, or did it stop?
I think it's all still gone good. As I said, a couple of years ago I read of about 20 cases here in the UK of young, and the press started picking up, and it was like, oh yeah, and even in my hometown here, we had young men of the exact same age that I looked at with these cases, all mysteriously dying in or near water after a night out and all this kind of stuff. So it's like I think it's a big worldwide pattern that hasn't been fully investigated yet.
For the victims, what are the characteristics of the victims or the commonalities?
They were all male. They were all in higher education. And they all had it was a very kind of tight age range of it. They were always found in water, even drowned, and mainly intoxicated. And even the ones that were like champion and captains of their swim teams were all found there as well. And it was always under very strange circumstances. In the early days, in the areas near the where they found the bodies, they used to find smiley faces, like the acid house kind of smiley face, kind of smileys, painted on surfaces and stuff. I don't know if that continued throughout, or if anyone continued looking for that, or as part of the symbolism behind this. I don't know. To be honest, I don't think anyone's looked at it fully, but I do know that the 2 detectives were still looking at it, because I spoke to them a couple of years ago, because I reached out and said, look, did you actually ever get my remote viewing information on this? Because it was I said to them, I just saw your...
Yeah, because it sounds oddly specific.
Yeah, I just saw their TV series, and I was like, damn, my information that I got years before matches what you're talking about in your TV series. So I reached out and said, did you actually get my RV information? Because it's got so much detail in there on how they're working and everything. And he said to me, no, I didn't actually see it. So I sent it to them again, but I still haven't heard from them since. But I did resend it to them.
And how many people have disappeared under these circumstances?
I don't know how many it would be now. As I said, I did this probably about 10 years ago, and I had a spreadsheet with 180 on it at the time.
Any particular universities?
No, it was spread. It was across the whole of the US. Yeah.
Okay. Any particular time of year?
I can't. It's going back a decade now, so I can't remember, to be honest. Yeah.
All right, I went.
It's definitely worth looking into, though. Have a look at it.
Right.
And if you want, I'll send you off air. I'll send you my remote viewing on it, and you can. It's very, I had some very strange stuff of, how this secret society would work, and, how even how they can contact each other through this. It wasn't even using the internet; it was using some kind of arcane bulletin board system and stuff.
Okay, so you did a lot of pro bono work for law enforcement. What? How did your kind of RV journey evolve after that?
I then hooked up with myself and Dick hooked up with
That's Dick Algier
Dick
or
Algier,
Algier.
yeah.
Algier.
He's now in. We're both with other remote viewers in Future Forecasting Group, but our kind of paid for remote viewing journey started with Courtney Brown and the Farsight Institute, where Courtney had this vision that he wanted to pay remote viewers like you would pay a normal professional to do remote viewing projects, and then he would put those projects out there for people to look at and as content to get information from. So we worked on projects for Courtney. I can't remember how many years. I think it's probably about 8 years solidly doing 2 to 3 projects a year, and that's how we cut our teeth really in producing remote viewing content for people that were paying for it. And that put us on our own personal journeys to where we are now, where we're full-time paid remote viewers chucking out this information for people.
Okay, so you're working on that. What sorts of clients, like industries, things like that, are hiring remote viewers right now?
I don't know too much about the personal side of things. I get people contact me all the time wanting to hire remote viewers. I have to be honest, because I do so much work through Future Forecasting Group. We do I'd say 90% of my work there, because it's hard when people contact me, because I do get contacted, as I said, with the missing people stuff, and then I get another range of people, and they want personal kind of almost like readings. Can you tell me what my future love's going to be, or the world's going to end? Can you tell me where I need to go to survive, or how to set up my business, that kind of stuff. And I do occasionally also get at least once a month get companies approach me. Can you help me look at what my competitors doing in the future and how to beat them and this kind of stuff? And it's very dodgy territory of working in that regard, because I wouldn't want to do that for a company, for example, that had a product or something in the US, because I know that there's so much suing goes on over there. And I know you would have to like prove intuition in a court of law, or remote viewing in a court of law or something. But I wouldn't want to be.
I don't think any serious company, because then they would have to prove that remote viewing was real, right?
I know, but corporate espionage and all that kind of stuff is just. I just want to stay away from that as much as possible. So we pretty much do our own thing, where we're putting out predictions. And we do lots of financial stuff and mystery stuff. So we are staying away from private clients more than anything as remote viewers. I know a couple of companies out there that do work for private clients, and they are working with corporations and businesses, primarily in Europe, to help teach them so they teach the project managers within these companies to actually listen to their intuition themselves and to be a bit more intuitive in regards to their own projects. But myself, I've steered away from that as much as possible, the private companies and stuff, because just because of the mess of it, the liabilities. I've done several. I have to be honest. I've done several paid projects looking at products that have primarily problems in the production stage, to try to work out where and why the error is happening. With some great success in that. Yeah.
Okay, so folks who are just joining, you're listening to Through a Glass Darkly Radio on United Public Radio, and I'm chatting with Daz Smith, who is a professional remote viewer. And okay, so you've done all this stuff. You are working at Future Forecasting. There are things that have come into your possession, and we're not going to discuss it now, but I think back in January, and then the episode would have appeared in February on my channel Through a Glass Darkly with Sean on YouTube, you talked about coming into possession of the notes of Pat Price, and you were going to potentially release them sometime in January, but you haven't released them yet.
Yep.
We're not going to talk about that now, but we will talk about that later in this interview. So I just want to preview that for folks. There is an answer, and it makes sense, and it's logical, but we'll get back to that. All right. I think we talked last time. We talked about a potential cyber attack or something that was potentially coming, and I think there kind of was one, sort of like there's like the AT&T stuff, and but I can't remember if that was before or after our interview. Was it after?
That was after. Yeah.
Okay.
And what happened? Just to recap, is I was just doing my normal remote viewing for future forecasting, and we do this thing every month where we try to look a month ahead to see what the news is going to be. In fact, this weekend we're on the 24th of the month this month. So this weekend, Saturday or tomorrow, I'm gonna have to sit down and try to do an RV session to work out what next month's going to be for us to publish, next week before the month starts. So we do this, and I was just doing one of these one month, and I had a flash image in my head come through, and I was like, "Whoa, what is that?" I'm going to follow that. So I decided to go off tangent and follow to see what that was. Essentially, I just wrote down, I think, around about 5 or 6 pages of information about how I could see how these Chinese men, general kind of types, were planning a free-stage attack scenario, and they weren't actually going for it, but they were actually in planning stages for it. I think the right word would be like they were running simulations of how it would work. So it was essentially a free-stage attack scenario on mainly the US, using first a cyber attack, but then following up with actual armed attacks on the coast and through infrastructure networks and stuff. So I just happened across it really, and I just followed it a little bit to see where it would go and what was entailed. I think I spoke to you about it and several other people. I did have a conversation with someone who's very well connected in a Pentagon government think tank, who also asked for me to send the information across to them, so they got it as well.
Was that before or after our interview?
I'm just trying to think. It might have been before. Okay. Yeah, I can't remember. As I said, everything already moves into one for me with all this at one stage. But I did give him the information as well, because he was very keen to see what happened with the information. I shared it with you, and I shared it with 2 or 3 other people, but I didn't really largely disperse it out there. And I think we cut it from the future forecasting monthly thing at the time, because I was like, whoa, I don't know if we should put this out there, because it just felt a bit dodgy at the time. But yeah, months later, I think earlier this year, we started seeing lots of reports. I started seeing lots of reports on Twitter and in the press about how these huge infrastructure attacks were happening in the US, which was perfect feedback for me, because it was just like, okay, that is exactly the type of scenarios that I felt that they were simulating at the time. My only hope is that the rest of it doesn't come true, and they don't actually go farther than simulations and do the 3-pronged attack that I was writing down, because I think one of the prongs was some kind of nuclear type missile that was smuggled in coastally in cargo, in a bit like cargo crate, not crate, but one of the big containers. But I felt that I didn't feel that it was going to do the the big nuclear attack type thing. I felt it was more of an EMP type weapon over a major city.
It was West Coast, right? It was the.
Again, I'm sorry on this. I sent you the data at the time. I vaguely, all these sessions merge into one for me after a point.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
just
it was, yes.
From an analytical standpoint, that's what. Because if you step back and try to piece it all together, the ideal scenario for them to do something like that would be in concert with an effort to take Taiwan, right? So they wouldn't cause as much chaos as possible on the western coast, right? Western
Yeah.
U.S. so that
Yeah.
our response time was retarded in some way,
Yeah.
right? And then I think there was some other kind of attack. I can't remember what the name of the attack is off the top of my head, but I think it's definitely being actively monitored. And with the Chinese right now, I think this is day 2 of their drill, quote unquote, around Taiwan. But they've encircled Taiwan with their ships right now.
Yeah.
And if they leave in about by tomorrow, then yeah, it was probably a drill.
Yeah.
But if they stay,
Mm.
and they're kind of passing through the window. The window,
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to do anything in May,
Mm.
but they could just choke off Taiwan for 3 months and then
Yeah.
commence things in August. So we're
Yeah.
not out of the woods yet. And the other thing too is our media is so controlled right now that, of course, it's going to be presented as a simulation, a drill,
Yeah.
whatever. And by the way, that serves the Chinese well too, because they can use it to get assets into place and all that stuff. There's also rumors that our Secretary of Defense disappeared for 2 days, but this time not due to incompetence like it was the last time, but due to again, these are all rumors. I have no idea where. So they could 100% be old wives' tales, but apparently he had booked some sort of a trip to Asia.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe to diffuse. And there's other breadcrumbs, right? Where you had I can't remember her first name, but Chow, like the wife of or the sister-in-law of Mitch McConnell, and she was the CEO of the Foremost Group, which is this massive shipping conglomerate that has, not headquarters, but offices in New York, Shanghai, and someplace in Japan. So deeply connected with the Chinese intelligentsia. She backed her Tesla into a lake and died.
Like you do, yeah.
Yeah, as one does. As one, it's kind of similar to Boeing. The Chinese, have a interesting track record, and then of course you have all these, at least 20,000 Chinese nationals are, roaming
as I said,
around the US now.
I stumbled upon what I got at the time. I would love for someone at some point, and I'm just putting this out there in the universe, to because I can't choose my own targets, to set me as a proper this kind of scenario, as a proper project. Not just me, but with other, because it's always good and better to have other viewers as well to confirm the data, because you have this overlap. I would love for it to be a proper project that was set to me, myself, and people I know at some point. It's just waiting for someone to do that, to see if that what we would get on this type of scenario happening. But as we've discussed in the past, I do think that we are coming up very soon, time wise, to some very big events that we in Future Forecasting Group have kind of luminously kind of wise picked up accidentally in our RV. And we've had a lot of stuff that's very weird, like whenever we were looking at the cryptos for a year solid, we saw, because we did try to determine charts for the cryptos with our remote viewing. It's going to go up and down over a period of time. They always get us to look 2 or 3 years into the future. And for a couple of years now, for the majority of the ones we've been looking at cryptos, there's been a big downturn, I think in the year 25. And I'm not saying that's due to some kind of cataclysmic event, but
I mean, look, it could be that the U.S. announces a digital currency and renders all the other ones obsolete. Right.
But we had other data, like in the pre-Palestine stuff that we had, that happened there, that also indicates something bigger. And we've had other stuff in the past that indicates something very big coming down the pipe as well. So although it's all from different projects, they all seem to be, personally for me, pointing to something very close in the future. It's not something that's been set for us as a single project that we've collected solid data on, which again is another same thing. It'd be good to look at the China situation thing, but it'd also be good for someone somewhere down the line to task me and the people I know with a group project to look at this future numinous event that seems to be indicated not just by myself, because I've had other remote viewers come to me and say we feel like we're seeing something in the future as well that seems to be coming down the pipe in the next few years that's going to impact the US in a big way.
You used an interesting word, numinous.
Yeah, it's like numinous or numinosity, and it's how I describe events that we as remote viewers pick up on, and it's almost like, if you can imagine us as, where the remote viewer here, and we're trying to put our intent out there around us in the universe, and it's completely dark because it's space. It's just what we are as remote viewers. We are very much attracted to events that have what I call a numinosity. So it's a luminous event in the future. So it has lots of energy about it, lots of entropy, lots of change, lots of emotion involved in it. These kind of events in the future, like when our group picked up on what was going to happen in Israel and Palestine and stuff, because it affects hundreds of millions of people and it's just so big. No matter, even if our target is something else, and in that case, our target was meant to be looking at future medical technology, but all of us as remote viewers all described the exact same event. It was a few weeks down the pipe because it's just so big out there in what we call the universe or time and space. Yeah, so I use the word numinous. It's an event that's got lots of entropy, energy, emotion, and it just glows out there in amongst everything. And your subconscious is like, as a remote viewer, you kind of launch your subconscious out there and it's looking around. It's like, oh, look at this event over there. That's really interesting. Look how bright that is. And it just goes, it's like a moth getting attracted to a light or a flame. Yeah, that's how it works.
Is this so not numinous but luminous with an L?
I say it with an N, numinous, yes, because it's not just light; it's energy, motion, entropy, change, emotions. It's all different. It's all
Okay,
of that.
all right. So I didn't necessarily mishear it, because just quickly, this is actually from I guess Oxford Languages. I don't know if that's like the Oxford Dictionary, but numinous is an adjective having a strong religious or spiritual quality, indicating or suggesting the presence of a divinity, the strange numinous beauty of this ancient landmark. So it's kind of almost like a mystical quality.
Yeah. Well, as remote viewers, we still don't know how the whole process of this works as well. People have been doing this remote viewing since 1972, so we're well over 40 plus years. We still have no mechanism for how remote viewing works. We kind of think it's probably something to do with quantum universe and quantum entanglement, and it's looking like that's the most probable explanation to me. But we don't have a definitive for this yet. And there are some very strange, esoteric, universal properties that are involved in all this as well. We can't lie about this, and we call it like the things like the trickster element. As remote viewers, there is this kind of trickster that plays tricks on us. In the fact that alone that I myself, many of the top remote viewers out there in the world, you're talking Joe McMahon Eagles, Ingo Swan, Pat Price, and all the top people I work with today, Dick Howgire and everyone else out there on the circuit, we can all, to some really pretty high degree, hit targets on a regular basis. But none of us can get the $100 million on the lottery. It's almost like on a day-to-day basis, you can hit everything. You just try to get that lottery, win all that personally for yourself, and it's almost like the universe goes, that's not for you.
Lynn Buchanan got close. Did I ever tell you that story?
Yeah, yes. I know some people that have won 100 or so thousand, but I haven't found anyone yet that's managed to win the multi-millions. It's almost like, no, you can do anything else, but you can't do that.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I think Lynn Buchanan spent like a day on it.
It means there's a consciousness involved. There is something bigger than us that's making that decision on our behalf.
Yeah, just for folks who haven't heard the story, Lynn Buchanan spent like a day on this problem, and he got the exact numbers right, 100% accurate. Only he bought the lottery ticket in the wrong jurisdiction. So I think he bought it in Maryland, but he correctly remote viewed the Washington D.C. lottery.
Yeah, I've got examples because I spent time on it, but I got to be honest, it does get a bit boring because it's numbers. Lottery numbers are boring inherently. Even though you think yourself like a win millions, your subconscious gets bored of it. But I tried it for several months, and the closest I got was because we have at the time in the UK we had it was 7 double-digit numbers, so that's like 14 digits. But I did get 5 of the double digits almost correct, but most of them were one number away. All of them. It's just like that doesn't happen by coincidence. It's just like, and that happened more than once. You know what I mean? And many people I work with on this, they do the same thing, and they find that they will actually be like, you'll get the 20s, the 30s, 40s, and 50s, all right, but they will be one number wrong here, one number wrong there, and it's so frustrating. So we do recognize that there is something, although there's probably a science connection to remote viewing, it's probably just quantum entanglement or information is everywhere in the universe. There is also something bigger that's involved. And I don't want to use the word God or anything like that because I don't know what it is or how it works, but there is this
source, God, whatever, right?
Yeah, there's definitely something bigger with a bigger plan involved at levels as well that affects us individually. And I say to people now that I'm actually convinced that the RV process that I'm going through that works through me is some kind of living life force type energy that exists everywhere in the universe. A bit like, and I know it's going to sound weird to most people, but the closest way I can equate it is to the Force in the Star Wars film. I truly believe now that there's this force of information, love, and creativity, all rolled into one kind of non-perceivable or non-seeable thing that exists through everyone in the universe. And me, as a remote viewer, I'm just tapping into it. And because I've spent 27 years tapping into it, I'm just a bit more keyed up to how it works through me because I've spent time concentrating on that. And that's all it is. We all tap into it in different ways. Some people with creative writing, some people with music and poetry. I think where they get their inspiration for that is the exact same well of inspiration from where I get my remote viewing.
All right, so going back to this numinous event, is this something that you would say is geopolitical by nature? Would it be something that has some element of non-human intelligences, so related to disclosure, to contact, all of the above, or a bunch of just discrete incidences that build up into something big? Or all, again, or the above, who knows?
Yeah. All the data that I've seen so far, and as I said, it's spread around different projects, because it comes in bits and pieces where it's not meant to. For me, indicates geopolitical, and which affects social and economic, all that kind of stuff. Rather than it's not non-human intelligence disclosure. It's not that. It's a big event that has, and it seems to have severe impact on the US. It seems to be US centric. I have to be honest. I do. I have got data that indicates tracks of weapons coming from Europe. So it breaks out in Europe and other areas. But the big majority and the big impact zone that seemed to have been indicated is in the US for this, in the data that I've seen so far.
And what sorts of things or elements of this are you seeing?
Again, I hate to be, dark on all this really, but the data that I've seen indicated from what we saw with the Palestine stuff that gets worse, and from other stuff previous to that, does have indicators in our RV data of having nuclear stuff. So we're talking, fallout, destruction, all the kind of stuff that you'd imagine comes with one of those kind of weapons or more being released.
Okay. Well, for the audience, we're all, I'm sure you hope you're wrong about that too. But
Absolutely, and we are, remote viewers aren't always right, and like on future events, and these are future events. My personal accuracy, which I scored over 5 years, is only 65% accurate.
that's still
So,
remarkable for just
yeah,
getting
it's
like
still pretty good. So
six numbers on a page, right?
yeah, six and a half times out of 10 of my predictions, I'm very accurate on, and the rest fall by. But everything's always changing as well. That's the interesting thing with this. Future is not set yet. It's very malleable, which is why I think I accidentally picked up on that Chinese kind of simulation stuff, and how I'd like to go back and redo it now to see if it's changed in any way. Especially as I gave the information to some people, and as I said, I sent it to someone who was head of a Pentagon think tank and so on to see. You never know if your information goes down the line, if someone acts upon it, something else gets in place and then changes the future in some way. I don't know.
Are you able to say which think tank that was, or is that no?
No, probably not right now. But no,
Okay, I'm not going to push on that. I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of so just for the audio, are you familiar with Christopher Robinson? Do you know who that is?
The name sounds familiar, but no, I don't remember.
He's British. He's British. He's English. He
the
was
psychic.
Yeah, I don't know if he's a precognitive dreamer, more specifically.
Yes, I know the guy. Yes, I remember that.
So
he did 911. Yes.
Yeah, he saw. I mean, he did the Lockerbie bombing. He saw he's disrupted IRA bombing plots.
Yes.
All that. I mean, he worked for MI5 and MI6 for 30 years. So, just to make the audience feel a little bit at ease, I mean, well, I'll lead with the bad and then end with the good. He also sees a bunch of similar chaos over the next, 18 months, several years, but he does not see any nuclear events yet.
Good.
Yet. But we'll see. We'll see. He also has a pretty firm prediction on the U.S. election, but I'll just leave that for the episode.
That'd be a good one. That's something I haven't done yet. We tried the last two elections, terrible results. In fact, the last one, the Trump and Hillary one. Every remote viewing people I know, and I know about 6 different groups that were at that target, every single one of them got it wrong. And the odds on that alone is just like, because in each group had about 6 remote viewers in each. So you're talking 30 to 40 plus remote viewers, some of the best across the world that I know.
I bet you they were subtly influenced though by all the propaganda, right? Because every poll was saying that Hillary was going to win.
It's quite possible, but bearing in mind at the time,
was probably that's true. They wouldn't.
They don't know they're working. They don't know they're working a future who's going to be president target.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it was just too weird to be coincidental that everyone got it wrong.
Although I think I did see a video where you guys did predict. So maybe it was Naeem who predicted that, and it might have been you too that had like Trump giving a speech or something like that.
I don't know.
I know you've done so many. I know you've done so
all
many.
rolled in one, and
I'm not saying that's what Chris Robinson saw. I'm just.
I have to be honest. I do have a. I'm not going to say with who because they won't. They might see this show, but I do have a project out there with several remote viewers out there to see if they can determine who's going to win. The next US election one. But as I said as well, I'm doing this for the past probably 10 years or so. We have a terrible track record of predicting that one.
Okay, so going back to this numinous event, like sort of what? So you have the nuclear aspect potentially.
Yeah, and it's bearing in mind, I'm talking about data here. We got a lot of stuff through future forecasting group, and it was tied to the stuff that was happening in Palestine. Although we didn't know it was Palestine at the time, we just knew that something was happening within weeks. But then we had greater stuff as well. So it's not just my data. So there's like 5. I'm kind of giving a summary of 5 remote viewers' data here, or Or
Right.
and it wasn't even that wasn't even the target. The target was meant to be looking at something in the future, but we all got kind of like waylaid over here, and it didn't just happen once as well. The taskers, once we missed the target, we all got the same thing. The taskers come back to us and said, "Okay, you all went off wrong." They reworded the target and they said, "Okay, go back to it." And they gave us. We didn't notice, of course, but they gave us the target again. We all went to the wrong place again, but it was the same wrong event, the numinous event, and then it happened a third time as well. So the odds on that happening was this just doesn't happen. So we knew it was something very strange and something very big and important. And most of all five of us did report things like ash clouds, falling kind of radiation, all that kind of stuff for a future based event.
Okay. In terms of anything on Russia, Ukraine that's worth mentioning?
We I don't think it was part of the same project, but we've worked other projects in the past looking at how safe the area of Hawaii would be. And we did have some indicators then. Again, it's looking so far ahead in the future. But we did have some indicators that there might be some kind of military action from the Ukraine-Russian area that would impact the US in that side. But that
In
was
Hawaii?
probably... Yeah.
Do you think that had anything to do with the Maui?
Well,
fire?
I predicted that. I actually sketched and drew that whole Maui burning down thing a year before that happened. Yeah, because it's part of that thing when they were saying, because Dick lives in the Hawaii area, and our team were like, okay, look ahead a few years to that area to see if Dick's going to be all right living where he is. I didn't know that. I was just given a target, and my target described a coastline, and the entire city coastline was burning down. And I drew the coastline and everything, and then a year later, the Maui thing happened with the exact same coastline that I drew burnt down. The only thing that wasn't reported too much in the official press that I reported in my RV data was that I felt that it was a beam weapon that actually caused the fires that burnt the city down.
Yeah, it could be like a particle beam or a directed energy weapon.
But I could give you the RV session on that, and you would actually see that the sketches of the coastline that I did with the port on the coastline and everything absolutely mirrored 100% the coastline that burnt down a year after I did that RV session.
Yeah, by the way, that whole thing's gone stone cold quiet too, as usual.
Yeah.
Right? People aren't talking about it.
No.
Even though, like, what's going to happen to the land? Are they just going to seize the land? Are they going to, like...
That would be really an interesting RV project. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is super sketchy stuff.
Yeah.
What about anomalous targets? What anomalous targets have you, or what were the most interesting anomalous targets that you've done?
I think, we've done so many, but the most interesting I would say would be the well, that's a good question. I mean, obviously the UAP ones of various different ilks, and I've done loads, including Phoenix Lights, Area 51, Roswell, and the Tic Tac one. That was interesting. But I would say the most interesting is probably what's happening at the Skinwalker Ranch area with what we call the hitchhiker effect. I've done that on two different occasions. One where I was the tasker, so I set the future forecasting guys to look at a UAP event that they caught on film to see what was happening. And then I myself was actually tasked to look at what the origin is of what they call the hitchhiker effect at Skinwalker Ranch as part of a Hellfire target. So, yeah, I had the unique perspective of running a project on that of other remote viewers, and also being blindly tasked a very similar thing by a tasker within Hellfire on that. And both sets of data mirror each other exactly on that, even though it's two different taskers, me being one being someone else. And yes, it's very interesting what's going on there with this with the weird kind of time stroke portal kind of network system that one of the places just happens to be in the Skinwalker Ranch region, but there are other ones across the globe, and not just that, but the actual effects itself, the effects of that like a virus seem to follow the people that have these kind of paranormal effects, and then they transmit it to their family, their friends, and neighbors, all that kind of stuff, and that definitely does have a non-human a basis. It comes from a non-human kind of interaction, and I don't know what it would need more research. I don't know what the reasons on that would be, but I mean, if you want me to show you, I could. I don't know if we can present on here. I always call the RV session up and show you bits of it if you want.
Yeah, I don't think for some reason I don't even think I can present on here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not my StreamYard instance, unfortunately.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. But yeah. So I think what's happening there needs a huge amount more research. But both projects came up with some very strange portal type energy network system. But also there was a definite connection of a non-human. I don't want to say alien because we don't know what they are at this stage.
Yeah, we have no idea. Right.
Yeah, but there is a non-human, very embedded non-human interaction element going on there, and it's been going on for a long time. It's almost like the system of it's almost like energy vortexes or portals. If I had to guess, I would say they were some kind of gate system that we can't see, some kind of non-physical wormhole type movement systems or gateways or something that we they're just not physical for us.
Yeah, I think Travis Taylor was saying it was like a Einstein-Rosen bridge structure, stuff like
that. Yeah. I'm just trying to. I just called it my session here now, and I haven't looked at it here. I got all kinds of words like magical time slip type thing. Yeah. So it's got all that kind of weird stuff. And I got here like a grid system, a matrix. I ask a matrix of what? Doors and paths. It's a system that travel to dimensions through portals and zones, and I even draw how this web works and all this kind of stuff. And then I go into detail about the non-humans, and it's typical imp-like, grey-like type entities that are involved in this in some way.
What I mean, in addition to Greys, what other entities have you seen in that remote viewing project?
I have to be honest. In all the RV projects I've done, I don't remember seeing anything that hasn't looked like a typical grey type being. Other than when I did, Area 51, I looked at that and went in depth into that. I did feel that one of those in Area 51, they did have something like a ball, a metallic ball shaped around about this size, metallic ball shaped metallic sphere thing that was very sentient, almost like what we're seeing now with the AIs that we're developing, but on a magnitude of 1,000,000 times more. That was actually within this metallic sphere, but I had the feeling that although it was locked up in a room, the people, the people that were running Area 51 didn't really know that it was a sentient being that they had trapped there.
Oh, so like defense officials or U.S. military officials had this thing they think is a technology, like an orb,
but they didn't know what it was,
and they don't know it's alive.
Or if they do know it's alive, I can't remember exactly, but I'm sure I picked up that they didn't know that it was as sentient as it was and as powerful as it was, but it was just like in a secure facility in a storeroom. It felt like it was just being locked away, and it was biding its time, kind of thing.
Did it try to communicate at all with these things with people, or did it?
I mean, I was being able to communicate with it because I was like probing it and picking up on it, but I don't think I'm just not sure they knew what they had.
What was its emotional state? Like, was it get me the hell out of here? Like, help me? Or was it just
no, not that I remember. I can't remember too much about it. It's in a live RV session because I did the RV session live on a whiteboard, and it's on my It's on my YouTube channel, remoteview.com, the Area 51 remote viewing session. So it's actually you'll see my impressions of it all live on there on camera. I can't exactly remember everything that I put down because it was like, it's got to be about 5 or 6 years ago, that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done like thousands since then. But I do remember it was highly sentient, highly intelligent, more intelligent than the AIs we have today. But bearing in mind, I did that 6 years ago. We didn't have AIs like we have them now. But now that I'm seeing AIs now and I'm using them on a daily basis, I'm thinking, oh, that's eerily similar to what I remember encountering 5 years ago. And I looked at that ball thing at Area 51, other than it was vastly superior to that. And it was essentially locked up in some kind of like almost like some kind of storeroom type thing on a shelf kind of thing that they don't know what they've got.
Classic. Absolutely classic. Have you done any remote viewing sessions on disclosure, the future of disclosure?
No, it's not been tasked to me. Not been tasked. I would love someone to do me like a what's going to happen in 2, 3, 5 years, or what's going to happen with certain individuals. But nothing on that one. No. One that is interesting though, that I did task myself to the future forecasting guys, which was I thought very interesting, was I tasked him to look to see if Bob Lazar was telling the truth by focusing on what he was doing actually real on some of the days he said he was working at Area S4 at Area 51. And the guys came back with lots of stuff about an underground facility, military stuff, non-human craft, and all kinds of stuff like that, and engineering and stuff. So their RV data seemed to mirror the story that Bob Lazar said he did at the time he said he was doing it, which I found very interesting. And we did all this as well pre-Grush and all of his revelations about yes, there is a crash and recovery program. Yes, they are back engineering. We know where it's happening and all that kind of stuff. So we did that several months before Grush came out as well. So that was interesting. We're just biding our time now to see if we get even more feedback over the next few years on to validate or not Bob Lazar's claims.
Now, in these documents that were recently released by Arrow, the Kona Blue proposal, there's mention of something called remote communications, and it's related to remote viewing. I mean, it literally says remote viewing and remote communications. Are you familiar with that terminology and what that might be, remote communications?
No, but it's very much possible. I mean, in the early days of the SRI program, Ingo Swann and several of the other psychics went down in a submarine to the bottom of the ocean, and they were running communication experiments then to see if they could psychically give answers to then that would then be used strategically to make decisions. Even though they were within a vast ocean where no ELF or anything like that could travel and stuff, and that they were successful at communicating things back then. So it wouldn't surprise me that it was going on. And also, there were some McDonnell Douglas documents that have been found. They were found in a barn or some, and it relates to some experiments in the 50s and 60s where they were looking at UAPs and how UAPs worked, and they then started talking to abductees and people, experiencers and stuff like that. And they were talking very seriously in these McDonnell Douglas documents about how the best way to communicate and work with the craft and the occupants would be using psychics and remote viewers. So it doesn't surprise me whatsoever. In fact, I've said this many times that getting someone like myself or people similar to myself, that would be the way to go to crack the communication UAP problem. I guess they're doing that behind the scenes in special access programs. I haven't heard anything about it, but I guess I mean, it'd be crazy if they weren't. But I guess the problem they have
is in the Kona Blue documents. So
the problem is though, the people that we know are really good at this, is less than 1% of the world's population. I mean, it's still probably hundreds of thousands of people out there that are good. It's just trying to find them under the right circumstances, make sure they've got the right clearances and getting them to do this. But yeah, it's the perfect way. Well, and just from myself, from being tasked to look at these kind of things over the years, Roswell, as I said, Area 51, all this kind of stuff that has UAP interference, I would say. There is no verbal communication that goes on in any of these cases anywhere. And from my research of reading many books and on this over decades now, anyone that has an interaction with an alleged non-human, the interaction is always telepathic in nature. It's not verbal that happens. So psychic people are the best way to go to try to get this communication chain working.
Well, there's 8 billion people in the world, so 1%, you're talking 80 million people.
Yeah. It's getting the right circumstances, though, isn't it? The right people, the right place, the right time, the people that don't talk, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I'd be very, very surprised if they're not doing it. Because we know, you can clearly see by the way that they're fighting the disclosure, that they're absolutely lying about all this. And I would have thought it's probably not even government owned now. It is under special access projects that have been filtered out to companies and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's far removed from the intelligence government. It's probably not even called non-human in communication. It's probably got some kind of weird word to it. Like I don't know what you'd come up with some kind of boring word to talk about what it is and that kind of thing, because that's how I would do it. But I'm absolutely convinced that that's the future, and I'm still surprised that none of the people out there that are running, because there are some very serious UAP researchers out there right now. I don't know a single one of them that's approached any serious remote viewer and said, how about trying a properly controlled scientific communication program?
Yeah, it might be because they don't want them to be able to do that. Right, that it exists and they don't want people to be able to. But to your point about coming up with some seemingly anodyne and boring terms, you can see they're rife in the Kona Blue documents, right?
Yeah.
They don't say time travel. They don't say they were investigating time travel.
Absolutely.
They say they were investigating temporal translation.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Which
very
is a smart
revealing documents. Those were very, very revealing. Yeah. And as you know, I'm very connected in the remote viewing world, and I have to be careful how I say this. I've had two what I would call very solid confirmations from very connected, knowledgeable people that there is an ongoing remote viewing program. I don't know if it's anything to do with communication. But I do know that I've had it confirmed that there's a very solid Intel-based remote viewing program that's still in operation.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lou Elizondo claims to have been taught remote viewing. So,
does, yeah.
And that was after the official program was canceled, quote unquote, Stargate. There's something else that I found interesting in those documents too. I can't remember exactly how they framed it, but effectively it was investigating remote viewing countermeasures. Are you familiar with this?
I've tried looking into it myself. I can't find any. There aren't any that we know.
Your colleague Edward Reardon experienced something like that. Did you tell you that story?
People claim to, and I've heard other people claim to as well. But I need to see kind of physical kind of evidence kind of guy. I've never encountered a target yet that I haven't had access to.
Yeah, well, he broke through it, but he kept hearing like music, and it's almost like the technique right now is to mask a highly energetic target with even more highly energetic activity, right?
Yeah.
So music, trauma, whatever, just put something there.
Yeah, I'm sure something's possible. And I'm sure that if they wanted to, they could stop us looking at certain places by creating like those numinous events, those energy motion events near to the target, but not actually at the target to kind of, so our subconscious go, ooh, look at this over there, that's sparkly. Yeah. So I'm sure that those in the know probably have created mechanisms to try to distract us. Again, I haven't seen anything solid on it, document wise or evidence wise, but it's very possible.
Yeah, it's not something they would want to share.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but I published probably about a year or so ago a document from Ingo Swann where he went to the moon on a second kind of journey to converse with non-humans that were on the dark side of the moon. And he talks about, he met these life forms there, psychically met them, I should say. And he talks about how they had two different types of telepaths. They had a defensive set of telepaths that were there to stop people from, like him, from incursioning on the moon and having a look. But he also talks about how they had an offensive set of telepaths. He didn't go into detail on what they were doing, but if that is the case,
where did he talk about this? Like what book?
It's not in a book. It's in a remote viewing session that I published in my remote viewing magazine. That's the only place it's been published. His initial journeys to the moon were in his book Penetration, which he did on behalf of, he alleged, the American government for some kind of intel agency. And then several years after that, he went back on his own reconnaissance with Bob Durant as his monitor. Bob Durant was like a ufologist and one of his students at the time. And I published that remote viewing session in its entirety of him going back to have more conversations to see what they're doing in the magazine, which people can download for free if they want to have a look at it. But as I said, he talks about encountering two different types of telepaths, non-human and telepaths, defensive and offensive. So it makes you wonder what the offensive ones are doing.
Did he discuss what the offensive ones were?
No, he just said they were two different types. One was a defensive mechanism, and one was an offensive mechanism.
I mean, remote viewing is by its very nature offensive, right? Because you're projecting yourself outward and you're gathering intelligence, right?
Well,
whereas defensive is preventing people from doing that. That's
I class remote viewing.
I'm not saying when I say offensive, it has connotations that it's aggressive and things like that. Just think positive.
Yeah,
you're doing something.
It's being passive.
Defensive is your. Oh well,
because I've never seen any evidence yet that Omachi or any remote viewer actually travels anywhere or any travel occurs in any way. I think all the information from the universe, the entire universe, is actually everywhere in the universe, so it's within us. So the information about the moon and Mars is actually within me, so I'm not traveling anywhere to get it. I'm just tapping into it instantly.
Right, but you're projecting your consciousness outside yourself to. No. Well, I guess you say, yeah. I need to listen. I need to listen better.
Like me and you are connected. Right. Even though there's physical space between us, me and you and everyone else in the universe is intimately connected. So I can get all the information about you, remote viewing wise, without going anywhere. Because it's like all that's what I think is something to do with entanglement, quantum entanglement. I think every particle in the universe is entangled with every other particle. And I, as a remote viewer, just finding some weird way to tap into that. Yeah, so we don't know if any remote viewer ever travels anywhere, which is why remote viewing is also a weird name, because it might not be remote and it's definitely not viewing.
Yeah, and it's also, back in the day, they might call it scrying or whatever. Like they had to call it something that had an anodyne sounding, like temporal translation, to get the government to fund it, right?
I just need to warn you about the time.
Yeah. We're getting there. So you talked about there were some anomalous targets that. Well, what targets, if you had your druthers, would you love to be tasked on?
The ones we've discussed, definitely, to see where disclosure is going to be in, I don't know, 3, 5, 10 years, maybe. I'd like to see a proper program because we know, let's be honest, we know that craft exist and various governments throughout the world own them and have them, and they're trying to back engineer them. I'd like to see a conscious effort working with people like Gary Nolan and maybe some of the top people in science to actually try to use remote viewers to try to get an edge on that. That would be fantastic as well. And maybe even other things like, not so esoteric, but esoteric, like the root of consciousness. And if there is something larger out there that's having a influence on all of our lives, what is that? Why is that? Can we commune with it in a better way than we are doing right now, kind of thing. So lots of things like that, I think. Lots of helpful things for humanity.
Okay. By the way, how are you doing on time? According to my clock here, the clock being the recording, I have a little bit less than 20 minutes left. Are you still?
I'm still fine. I'm still fine here.
Okay. All right. You're warning me. You're warning me. So the StreamYard actually lets me.
I'm warning you for that one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I should be. We should be pretty good for about 18 minutes or so. Okay. Pat Price.
Okay. Yep.
The remote viewing documents that you had that you were considering releasing back in January still haven't been released.
Yes.
What's going on with that? What's the latest update?
Okay, so we were going to release them and we got very close to doing it. But with the timing of it, with everything that was happening with the UAP disclosures, with Grush and the whistleblowers and everything else, and knowing that the documents came from some of the very same people involved in all the disclosure movement, I wasn't satisfied when asking questions of why did they keep the documents hidden for 40 years? Could I validate them? Could I get better copies of them? And I was asking questions about the origins of the documents. I didn't get the answers that I felt gave me a warm feeling inside. I had a niggling kind of intuition, kind of feeling that maybe we were being played in some way and being manipulated to put these documents out there to cause a certain scenario situation. So I personally got cold feet on it, and I thought, I don't want to play that game. If I don't get confirmation that I feel I needed, I didn't want to release documents, because when they will be released, I know that a person, Skip Atwater, is probably writing a book about the entire whole project, and he will probably put them in that. I just felt that I didn't want them to be out there right in the middle of this disclosure situation to add more negativity that I keep seeing out there to what's happening with that. And I have to be honest, doing all my research all these years, there's a lot of negativity that's involved. If they are abducting people and manipulating them and implanting them and all this kind of stuff, that I class that as being very negative. The humans aren't invited to be involved in that on some level. So I do feel that there's lots of negativity out there. But the documents from Pat Price go even worse, because I have to be honest, they do talk about UAPs being involved in killing and farming and mutilating humans in some of the documents. So I didn't feel that it was right to put that out there right now without me having enough of a background to do so. And I felt that if other people wanted to, then I would leave it to them to. I'm happy to talk about it, but I'm not going to. And it had names in there as well. Like the documents do name that, every facet of human society, it goes on to say, is being infiltrated. And it goes on to name, schools and universities, departments in government, religions, and people within religion positions by name. So, and it's almost like doxing people. So again, without credibility, I don't want to be the person that does that.
Now, the infiltration that it talks about, is this something that was according to the Pat Price document, was it something that was relatively recent infiltration, or is this something that's been with human society for thousands of years?
I would say with thousands of years, but when he looked at it in 1972, 1973. So the positions he talked about would be related to, those years. So he actually names positions. So you could quite easily go online and see who held that position in 72, 73, and then say, okay, that person's, I don't know how you class the infiltration. I think we'd have to discuss that. One of the people doing the research says that they're essentially non-human. I don't know if there's enough to classify that at this stage. But yeah, so you could essentially go, okay, this person that was head of this defense department, Pat Price is saying that in this year that person's an alien or an alien hybrid or, an infiltrator of some kind. So I don't want to be the person that actually puts that information out there for people
Yeah. You don't want to put names out there or positions, but were they conscious infiltrators or conscious hybrids?
I'm not sure he goes into that detail. He does detail in the documents that there are non-human. Again, it was 1972, so bear in mind he didn't have all the information that we have nowadays. But he did detail that there were two races of non-humans that were battling over resources on the planet, and they were fighting each other, and they were essentially infiltrating every facet of human society at every level to keep us questioning and fighting against each other, so that we're not looking at what they're doing.
And which groups were they? Like, did he describe what
He
the
does
species
describe
were?
in the document. I can't remember exactly how he described them, to be honest. He describes them. He describes their facilities, and he even describes. We were talking about intrusion countermeasures. He does actually describe about how when a psychic infiltrates their base or their facility, that they can lock on to that psychic and identify their signature, and when they try to come back again, they can track that psychic and stuff like that. So he actually draws and describes the machines that with crystals and stuff that are allegedly doing that kind of stuff. So there is some levels of detail in these documents as well. Again, unverifiable. All of it's unverifiable.
Right. It's still absolutely.
Yeah, but bearing in mind it's from Pat Price, who was one of the best psychics when he did this in 1972. He was one of the best psychics that was being used at SRI. That was the exact same time as well, coincidentally, that he was then recruited by the CIA, and then a few weeks later, not long afterwards, he died under what some people say are mysterious circumstances. And these documents have been kept in pretty much the hands of one or two people, probably three or four people for 40 plus years.
Now, when you asked questions about this, what answers did you get that you weren't satisfied with?
I didn't get any answers back, and that's what mystified me, really, because the person that passed the documents on to me has been a constant source of off the record information in the past, and I know their credentials are rock solid. So when I said, okay, I need verification on some of this stuff, I need to know the context and the background, and I didn't get anything whatsoever, not even an answer. That's when I start getting a bit,
I'm not going to say it over here. I'll tell you afterward. I have a pretty good sense of who this person is. I don't know why, but I have a good sense. If I'm wrong, you just tell me I'm wrong, but I'm not going to.
I may have even mentioned their name in the past as well when I've talked about this, but I'm just not doing it right now.
No, I don't recommend that.
So that worried me. And again, with the greater thing of what was going on with the ecosphere of disclosure and everything else that's coming out, I was like, I spoke to the other two guys that were working on this with me, and I was like, are we sure we're not being used here? Because it just doesn't feel quite. It just doesn't sit quite right. Why hold on to it for 40 years? Why release it to us? Why release it now when all this is going on? Who gains from this? What effect? So I said, I just feel uneasy about this, to be honest, guys.
I mean, I can tell you exactly. It makes sense to me. Even if it's wrong, what it does is it sows doubt in the people who are running the cover up, right? Oh, why are they running the cover up? Oh, there might be hybrids. Oh, so, we need to this is something that we need to get out in the open right away. It also feeds the kind of the Von Braun thesis, right? Like first they're going to do the Russians, then they're going to do the the terrorism, and then after terrorism they're going to do extraterrestrials, right?
Yeah.
So it adds to that fear narrative that enables people to invest more in defense, pay more attention to this issue. And it might be done in the person might have good intentions, but
And as I said to you, I do believe, from my research on this, that there are a lot of negative things going on with possible abductions, hitchhiker effects and people being ill from craft exposure, all that kind of stuff. I do believe that there is some negativity going on, but I'm not sure from everything I've encountered, both in RV and out of RV with my other experiences, I don't think that's the whole answer and whole situation. I think that there are some positive stuff that's trying to have an influence as well. It's just that I was just worried that I was being manipulated to take it down a certain route, which I wasn't prepared to go down, even though I do know that there is negativity out there with this.
Yeah, I mean, if it was all negative, we would be apparently in charge. I say apparently for it's not necessarily apparent to me that we're in charge.
Yeah.
Okay. So is this something that you might release later, or you think Skip Atwater is going to be the one that?
I think Skip Atwater, as I heard, he's writing a book because he did some of the first RV sessions and exposure of this whole project. I believe he's writing a book, and he's probably going to put the documents in that book. If he doesn't, then me and the other guys will probably just put them online somewhere and just have
blot out the name,
blot out the
names and positions.
We can't confirm any of it or anything, but you have to make it your own mind. Because I am a person that does like to put as much out there as possible. It's just that I didn't feel it was right. It just didn't feel right at this time right now. The way it was given, no confirmation on it. It just smelt a bit weird to me. So I pulled back on it a little bit.
Okay. Any final words for the audience?
Oh, good question. No, other than, if remote viewing's real, intuition's real, everyone's got it. Listen to your gut feeling. We all have a gut feeling. Listen to it. We all know if something's right or wrong, and just follow that. And if you want to go even further, there's plenty of resources like my website online where you can try all this for free. There's tons and tons of free resources, my free magazine, my free videos. I'm not selling anything with any of this. Go try it for yourself.
Can you let the audience know what the website is and the name?
Yeah, my main website is called remoteview.com. The remote viewing channel on YouTube is called remoteview.com, and there's thousands of hours of interviews on there for people to watch for free as well. And the free magazine is called 8martinis.com, and there's 16 issues going back something like 12 years with hundreds of remote viewing examples and news and tips on how to remote view as well.
Why is it called 8 Martinis?
It's called 8 Martinis because, and that comes from Ingo Swann, where he did a remote viewing session that was so good. I'll read it like this. It's an intelligence community in-house term for remote viewing data that was so good that it cracked everyone's realities, so they had to go out and drink 8 martinis to recover.
And is that who came up with that term, or is it just?
That came from Ingo Swann. I think he heard one of the intelligence people talking about it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, my friend, as always, it is a pleasure, and
it's been great.
If you do need targets, I'm happy to assign plenty of them, but I know you're super busy.
Yeah, we should talk.
We should actually do an episode at some point where we. I give you some targets, and then a few months later, a few weeks later, we come back and just talk about it. But I know you were super busy, so I haven't. I know we kind of discussed that loosely, but I haven't pushed it because I know you're so busy and you have.
Yeah, no, I'm busy, but I'm sure we can do something, months in advance, and I can gather a few other people that need some practice targets as well, that have skills. And they can do it ad hoc on the side as well. Yeah, so I'm sure we can come up with something.
All right, so for folks who are just joining at the very end, you're listening to Through a Glass Darkly Radio on United Public Radio, and I'm with Daz Smith, and we are wishing you a good night, Godspeed, and have a wonderful, current week, because this will appear on a Sunday night. So thank you, Daz. Good talking to you again.
It's been great fun.